Here at Tank Encyclopedia, we delve into the stories of significant and intriguing armoured vehicles throughout history. While our primary focus remains on real-world fighting vehicles, we don't shy away from exploring fake or hypothetical ones. Whether they arose as what-ifs, video game vehicles, jokes, or deliberate misinformation, at times we even make videos about them. In this video, we examine an unusual M3 medium tank exhibited at the Army Museum in Lahore, Pakistan. This vehicle stands out for two reasons: the absence of its original turret and the addition of a long 17-pounder gun, typically associated with the British Sherman Firefly. Interest in this peculiar vehicle surged in 2015 when a scale modeler shared a custom-built replica of the tank on a forum. This model, created using a technique known as kit bashing from an airfix kit, was dubbed the M3 Lancer. While the model was visually striking, it inadvertently triggered a snowball effect of misinformation and fabricated history surrounding the alleged vehicle. Today, our aim isn't to critique the modeler or their community, but to untangle the myths surrounding the M3 Lancer and uncover the truth behind the supposed surviving example in Pakistan. We're charging into 2025 with renewed energy and the release of the 10th issue of the Tank Encyclopedia magazine. Here's a taste of what's inside. First up, the pre-World War I CGV 1905 armoured car. This early innovation influenced France, Germany and Russia's armoured forces. Read Leander Jobs' brilliant account of this trailblazer in armoured vehicle history. The battle for Steamroller Farm takes centre stage in this issue. Andrew Hills recounts this key moment of the Tunisian campaign of 1943 with meticulous detail, inaugurating our new column on the combat history of armoured vehicles. Curious about World War II Italian engineering? Discover the Semavente M40DA 7532 self-propelled gun, explored in Arturo Giusti's in-depth article. Modern armour fans? Explore the Mowag Piranha 3C, used by the Spanish Marines. This piece traces the evolution of Spanish Marine armoured vehicles from the 1920s to today. Visit our store on PayHip to enjoy issue number 10 or all 10 issues of Tank Encyclopedia magazine. Lovingly prepared by our dedicated team. Thank you for being part of our journey. And now, onward with the video article. At some point, the Army Museum in Lahore acquired a turretless hull of an M3 medium tank. For reasons that remain unclear, a 17-pounder gun was mounted onto the hull. This unusual modification later caught the attention of a scale modeler who shared a custom-built replica of the tank on an online forum. Creating such kit-bashed, fictional models was not new, with one of the most famous examples being the KV-6 Behemoth, which appeared online in 1997. The creator of the Lancer model went a step further by developing a detailed backstory for the vehicle, albeit one that was entirely unsubstantiated. A prototype tank destroyer built on the chassis of the M3 Grant tank. While the Grant tank was key to some earlier successes in the Desert War, the 75mm waist gun had less AT penetration than the 37mm turret gun. The tank itself was tall and hard to hide. To solve both issues, the hull of a Grant tank was used as a mount for the new 17-pounder AT gun. To reduce overall height and increase ammo storage, the turret was removed from the Grant chassis. To mount the fairly large 17-pounder gun in the hull sponson, the gun was turned 90 degrees on its side. This is the same configuration used on the much later Sherman Firefly. Removing the turret reduced the weight enough to increase performance by over 8 km per hour, which allowed the TD to move into position quickly and manoeuvre to engage threats from any angle. The TDs got the nickname Lancer as the long 17-pounder gun made the tank look like a charging knight with his lance ready for jousting. This description contains numerous problematic claims and glaring inaccuracies, necessitating a detailed debunking. To begin with, the statement about the 75mm gun is entirely incorrect. While the M2 gun may not have been the most powerful anti-armour weapon of its time, it was capable of penetrating up to 70mm of armour. The M3 gun could penetrate over 117mm of armour. In comparison, the 37mm M6 gun could achieve a maximum penetration of 61mm. The supposed origin of the Lancer during the summer of 1942, amidst the North African campaign, is another flawed assertion. The Ordnance quick-firing 17-pounder anti-tank gun, which is central to this claim, did not appear on the battlefield until 1943. The earliest examples of the 17-pounder in combat came from a pre-production batch mounted on modified 25-pounder howitzer carriages. These were deployed late in the North African campaign to counter increasingly formidable German armour. It wasn't until 1944, in preparation for Operation Overlord, that vehicles armed with the 17-pounder, such as the M10C Achilles, the Archer and the iconic Sherman Firefly, began to see widespread use. Contrary to popular belief, the process of fitting the 17-pounder gun into the Sherman turret was far more complex than simply flipping and wedging it into place. To accommodate the gun, the recoil system had to be extensively redesigned. Additionally, its cradle was shortened, which reduced the gun's support. This issue was addressed by reprofiling the barrel to ensure circumferential contact support. Another major modification involved reconfiguring the breech. On the towed version of the 17-pounder, the breech operated vertically, but for the Sherman it had to be redesigned to function horizontally. This required relocating the breech controls to align with a new orientation. Collectively, these changes were standardized in the 17-pounder Mark IV. Incorporating the 17-pounder into the 75mm gun mount of the M3 would have posed even greater challenges. On the M3, the gun was mounted on a pivot attached to the hull floor, with the gunner's seat connected to the base. The gunner traversed the gun horizontally using hand cranks, moving with the mount as it turned. However, this mounting system was relatively lightweight and unsuitable for handling the larger and heavier 17-pounder, necessitating a complete redesign. The original 75mm gun on the M3 had a vertical traverse range of -9 degrees to +19 degrees, and a horizontal traverse arc of 30 degrees. These already narrow firing arcs would have been significantly reduced if the 17-pounder had been installed. The larger breech would likely have collided with the hull floor, roof or inner right wall, further restricting movement and limiting the gun's ability to traverse left or adjust elevation effectively. The claim regarding weight reduction is questionable. The turret's weight varied between the Lee and Grant models. The Lee turret weighed 1.8 tons, while the Grant turret weighed 2.5 tons. The M3's top on-road speed was 42 km an hour. While removing the turret would have saved between 1.8 and 2.5 tons, this saving does not account for the added weight of the much larger and heavier 17-pounder gun, which likely offset the reduction. The 17-pounder gun, on its towed mount, weighed 2.9 tons. A larger gun also necessitates larger ammunition. Individual 17-pounder rounds could weigh up to 17 kilograms. Assuming an ammunition load of 77 rounds, similar to that of the Firefly, the main gun ammunition alone would add nearly 1.2 tons. Combined, the weight of the gun and its ammunition could total 2.7 tons or more. In reality, the Lancer may have ended up heavier than the original vehicle. Lastly, the British did not adopt the concept of tank destroyers as the Americans or Germans did. Instead, in British doctrinal terms, any vehicle designed exclusively to combat enemy armour was classified as a self-propelled anti-tank gun. The doctrine and organisational structure surrounding these vehicles differed significantly from both American tank destroyers and German Panzerjägers. There are a few key distinctions between self-propelled anti-tank guns and regular tanks. First, these vehicles were operated by members of the Royal Artillery rather than the tank regiment. Second, they lacked coaxial machine guns, as their primary purpose was not to engage infantry but to counter armoured threats. Had a vehicle like the Lancer existed, it would likely not have been given such a name, regardless of its design. Self-propelled anti-tank guns were consistently named with the prefix A, as seen in examples like the M10C Achilles, the Archer, and later models such as the A30 Avenger. Tanks, on the other hand, were named with the prefix C, such as the A27 Cromwell and A30 Challenger. One notable exception to this naming convention was the Sherman Firefly, another British conversion based on an American chassis. An additional feature of the model, not explicitly mentioned in the description, is the retrofitted machine gun turret. Interestingly, this is actually a reinstalled auxiliary turret, taken from the Lee variant of the M3. According to the original post, detailed later in the Build Process section, this turret was intended as a novelty feature for the commander. The original turret ring was sealed off, and the smaller turret was installed at the centre. While having a machine gun for infantry defence seems logical, its placement was far from practical. The commander's visibility from the turret would have been significantly limited, rendering it of questionable utility. A more functional alternative might have been to remove the entire roof, creating sufficient space for handling the massive rounds more efficiently. The supposed origin of the vehicle lies in the Battle of Alam el Halfa, which took place south of El Alamein between 30th of August and 5th of September 1942, before the Second Battle of El Alamein. It is claimed that the Lancer was a prototype tank destroyer that was rushed into combat, with as many as 6 Lancer M3s used in the Battle of Alam el Halfa. The claim is backed up by the following fictional after-action report. Teamed with a scout platoon of 3 M3 Honey light tanks, the 6 prototype M3 Lancer TDs set up in a mutually supported ambush position near the Alam al Halfa ridge. At dawn on September the 1st, several Panzer Mark III and IVs appeared in the ambush zone. These tanks had struggled through the minefields the night before and were charging forward to make up time on the German schedule. They ran straight into the 17-pounder guns of the Lancers. 2 Mark IIIs were immediately destroyed in the first volley. A Mark IV was able to hit a Lancer, knocking out its gun with a lucky shot. As the German tanks scattered for cover, the Lancers continued to fire rapidly, knocking out another 3 German Panzers. Just as it seemed the battle was won, a German scout platoon of 4 SDKFZ 222 armoured cars appeared and engaged the right flank TD from the rear, destroying the tank. A second Lancer attempted to turn and engage and was immediately knocked out by a Panzer III. It was only the timely intervention of the scout platoon Honeys that drove off the German scouts, which prevented the flank from falling. As the last scout moved into a depression to escape, a Lancer took a long-range shot, which turned the armoured car into a fireball. With the scouts gone, the Panzers popped smoke and pulled back from the engagement. As the write-up continues, it is claimed that the new Lancers performed well in the engagement. There were several shortcomings discovered in the design. One would think this painfully obvious. It is reported that the vehicles were particularly vulnerable due to their weak armour and large silhouettes. Allegedly, 2 vehicles were lost during the battle, with internal ammunition cook-offs cited as the cause of their destruction. In a rather dubious claim, the author suggests that the failure of the Lancer served as inspiration for the development of purpose-built vehicles such as the Firefly. However, the Firefly was primarily a stopgap solution, created while tanks specifically designed to mount the 17-pounder gun was still in development. The write-up further notes that none of these Lancer vehicles survive today. Those that reportedly survived the battle were supposedly converted into armoured recovery vehicles, a role for which many variants based on the M3 chassis, such as the M31, were employed. The actual Battle of Alam el Halfa was a much larger engagement in which British Lees and Grants played a crucial role in repelling the assault of the German panzer divisions, supported by towed anti-tank guns. No 17-pounder guns or 17-pounder armed vehicles participated in the operation, as these were not yet available in Africa at the time. The purported existence of a Lancer in Pakistan further contradicts the claim that all such vehicles were lost in combat. The exact circumstances under which the Pakistani museum acquired the M3 remain unclear. Several theories exist, but they are speculative at best. One possibility is that some M3s originated from British stockpiles. During the Second World War, British forces employed M3 tanks against the Japanese in the Far East. After the conflict, it is conceivable that some of these tanks eventually ended up in Pakistan, which was then part of British India. Another possibility is that the M3 in question was a Canal Defence Light variant. The CDL program utilised several different tank hulls, including the M3, to carry experimental lighting systems designed for night operations. While most CDLs saw limited service in Europe, some were redeployed to the east for potential use against the Japanese. Under the 43rd Royal Tank Regiment, 36 M3 CDLs were sent to India as part of preparations for a planned invasion of Malaya in February 1946, a campaign that never materialised. Interestingly, the M3 CDLs were eventually put to use in a different capacity. In 1946, they assisted the Calcutta police during widespread riots, reportedly with great success. While detailed accounts of their further deployment are scarce, it is plausible that one of these tanks found its way into Pakistan. It's also possible that the museum acquired a spare hull from one of many countries. After World War II, numerous military vehicles were sold off cheaply and repurposed as agricultural machinery in less affluent regions, which could explain this vehicle's origin. As for the gun, it's not uncommon for museums to fit their vehicle exhibits with inaccurate or entirely fabricated replicas. This is particularly true when the hull lacks a gun at the time of acquisition. Simple lengths of pipe are often used as a replacement, though occasionally mismatched turrets are mounted for display purposes. The vehicle in question is displayed outdoors on the grounds of the Army Museum in Lahore, exposed to the elements. According to Google Maps imagery, the barrel appears to have been restored to a more accurate configuration between 2019 and 2022. A recent visit to the museum shows the vehicle with a corrected barrel but still lacking a turret. While the concept of the Lancer may seem somewhat fanciful, there were genuine efforts to create a tank destroyer using the M3 medium chassis. Among the most notable attempts were the 76mm gun motor carriages T-24 and T-40. The T-24 featured a 76mm gun mounted centrally on the vehicle, positioned atop a high pedestal in an open casemate built on the M3 chassis. In contrast, the T-40 also had its armament centrally located within an open-top casemate, but with the gun positioned much lower, which helped reduce the vehicle's vertical silhouette. Despite these innovations, neither design was accepted for service, as both were overshadowed by the successful M10 Wolverine. This wraps up our video on the M3 Lancer. What are your thoughts on this fake vehicle? Did we cover all the important points, or do you think we missed something? Would you like to see similar videos exploring other fictional tanks? Share your opinions in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Dave Shuford, Wolf Hund, Michael Herman, Peter Bradbury, Leslie Holkower, Dan Fitzpatrick, Owen M, and Alex Harvey. Until next time, keep us in your sights.